I was folding his laundry when the hospital called to say my husband had been in a car crash, and that the woman in the passenger seat wasn't making it. The phone rang at 2:47 p.m. on a Tuesday. I remember because I was standing in our bedroom, holding one of Jake's work shirts, the fabric still warm from the dryer. The number flashed across my screen, Seattle Medical Center, and my stomach dropped before I even answered. Mrs. Patterson, this is Nurse Chen from Seattle Medical. Your husband, Jake Patterson, was brought in about an hour ago. There's been an accident. My hands went cold. The shirt fell to the floor. Is he okay? What happened? He's stable. Broken ribs, concussion, lacerations. He's gonna be fine. But ma'am. Her voice shifted, became careful, measured. There was another passenger in the vehicle. Female. She didn't survive the impact. The words didn't land right. They floated somewhere above me, refusing to make sense. What? Well, Jake was going to a meeting in Tacoma. He was alone. Silence on the other end. Heavy, suffocating silence. Ma'am, I think you should come down here. I drove to the hospital in a fugue state, my mind spinning through explanations that made no sense. Coworker. Hitchhiker. Someone he'd given a ride to. Jake was a good guy, he helped people. That's what he did. That's who he was. My husband of 9 years. The father of our 7-year-old daughter, Emma. They'd been seeing each other for 14 months. 14 months. More than a year of lies. Of business trips that weren't business trips. Of late nights at the office that weren't. Every night. The bedroom we'd shared for 9 years. How many times had he lied to me in this space? I started searching. I don't know what I was looking for. Evidence, I guess. Proof that this was real, that I wasn't losing my mind. I went through his closet, his drawers, his nightstand. And then I found it. A shoe box on the top shelf of his closet. Hidden behind a stack of old sweaters. Inside were receipts. Hotel receipts, restaurant receipts, receipts for jewelry I'd never seen. There were printed emails. Exchanges between him and Madison about meeting times, about cover stories, about how careful they needed. We'd been roommates at the University of Washington, had stood in each other's weddings, had held each other through breakups and family deaths and every crisis in between. If anyone could help me navigate this nightmare, it was her. I told her everything. Showed her the receipts, the emails, the photos on Madison's phone. She sat on my couch, her face getting harder and harder as the story unfolded. "That son of a bitch," she finally said. "That absolute son of a bitch. He says he was ending it. That they were driving back from breaking up. And you believe him. I don't know what to believe anymore." Jess poured us both a glass of wine. "Okay, let's think about this logically. Even if he was ending it, which, let's be real, he probably wasn't. He still carried on an affair for over a year. He still lied to you every single day. He still put another woman before his family. I know. And now she's dead. Which is tragic, don't get me wrong. But it doesn't erase what he did. It doesn't make him the victim here." She was right. I knew she was right. But there was still this tiny voice in the back of my head asking if I was being too harsh. If I should give him a chance to explain. If 14 years together, 9 of them married, deserved more than one day of rage before I made any decisions. "What are you thinking?" Jess asked, watching me carefully. "I'm thinking I don't recognize my own life anymore." We drank wine and ordered Thai food and sat on my couch until late into the night, dissecting every moment of my marriage, looking for clues I'd missed. And there were so many. The time he'd come home from a client dinner, smelling like women's perfume. He'd said he'd hugged a colleague goodbye. I'd believed him. The weekend he'd gone to Vegas for a conference, and come back with a tan and hickey on his shoulder. He'd said he'd gotten too much sun at the pool and that the hickey was from an allergic reaction to something. I'd believed him. The way he'd started password protecting his phone 6 months ago. He'd said it was for work security. I'd believed him. Every lie had an explanation. And every explanation had been just plausible enough that I hadn't questioned it. "You're not stupid," Jess said, reading my mind. "He was careful. He knew how to manipulate you. But I should have known. I'm his wife. How did I not know? Because you trusted him. That's what you do when you love someone. You trust them. But I had no idea what was coming next." Jake was released from the hospital 3 days later. I picked him up because I didn't know what else to do. We drove home in silence, the air between us thick with everything unsaid. He stared out the window, his casted arm resting on his lap, his face still swollen and bruised. "Liv," he started. "Don't." He closed his mouth. Nodded. Emma was still at my mom's house. I'd told her Daddy was sick, that he needed to rest. She'd made him a get-well card covered in hearts and glitter. It was sitting on the kitchen counter when we walked in. Jake saw it and started crying. "You don't get to do that," I said, my voice sharp. "You don't get to cry over her when you're the one who destroyed this family." "I know." His voice was hoarse. "I know. God, Liv, I'm so sorry. I never meant for any of this to happen. But it did happen. For over a year it happened. Every single day you made the choice to lie to me. To sneak around. To be with her. I was going to end it. I swear I was going to tell you. I didn't know how." I laughed, bitter and sharp. "You were going to tell me. When? After another year. After she moved in with us. After you left me for her." He flinched. "It wasn't like that." "Then what was it like, Jake? Explain it to me. Make me understand how you could do this." He couldn't. He sat there at our kitchen table, broken and guilty, and he had no explanation that would ever be enough. Over the next few days the story came out in pieces. He'd met Madison at a company conference in Portland 2 years ago. They'd hit it off, started texting. It was harmless at first, or so he claimed. Just friendly conversation. Then she'd transferred to the Seattle office, and they started having lunch together. Then drinks after work. Then one night, at a hotel bar during another conference, they'd kissed. I should have stopped it then, he said. I should have walked away. But I didn't. And it kept going. It became this whole other life. A whole other life. That's exactly what it was. He'd compartmentalized everything. Work Jake and home Jake. Madison Jake and live Jake. He'd kept us separated, boxed up, never letting the two worlds collide. Until they did. Until physics and bad luck and his own recklessness sent his car careening into a tree and shattered the illusion he'd been living in. Did you love her? I asked one night, my voice barely above a whisper. He was quiet for a long time. Too long. I don't know. I thought I did. But now. He looked at me, his eyes red and pleading. I know I love you. I know I want our family. I know I made the worst mistake of my life. She's dead, Jake. She's dead because of you. Because you were speeding, because you were distracted, because you were too busy living your double life to pay attention to the road. And now her family has to bury her. He broke down then. Completely. And I sat there watching him cry, feeling nothing. No sympathy. No compassion. Just a vast, empty numbness where my love for him used to be. The calls started the next day. Jake's parents asking what had happened, if he was okay, offering to come stay with us. His sister Karen called 3 times before I finally answered and told her, point blank, that Jake had been having an affair and the woman died in the crash. The silence on the other end was deafening. Oh my God, she finally said. Liv, I had no idea. Does Emma know? Not yet. I don't know how to tell her. I'm so sorry. Is there anything I can do? No. But thank you. After I hung up, I realized that everyone was going to know. His family, our friends, our neighbors, Emma's school. This wasn't something we could hide or explain away. The truth was out there, spreading like wildfire. And I was going to have to face it. Madison's funeral was that Saturday. I didn't go. But Jake did. He said he needed to. That he owed it to her family. That he had to face what he'd done. I told him to do whatever he needed to do. That I didn't care anymore. He came home hours later, his eyes hollow. He didn't say much. Just went straight to the guest room, where he'd been sleeping since he got out of the hospital, and closed the door. That night, lying alone in our bed, I made my decision. I filed for divorce the following Monday. I met with a lawyer in downtown Seattle, a sharp-eyed woman named Rebecca who listened to my story without judgment and then laid out my options. Washington is a no-fault state, she explained. So his affair won't impact the divorce settlement directly. But given the circumstances, the accident, the media attention, his culpability, we can use that to our advantage in custody and asset division. Media attention. I hadn't even thought about that. But she was right. The story had made the local news. Pharmaceutical rep dies in crash with married co-worker. Jake's company had put him on administrative leave pending an investigation. Madison's family was considering a wrongful death lawsuit. Our private tragedy had become public spectacle. Rebecca helped me file a restraining order too. Not because I was afraid Jake would hurt me physically, but because I needed space. Distance. A legal barrier between us while I figured out how to put my life back together. When the papers were served, Jake called me 17 times in 1 hour. I didn't answer. Finally he sent a text. Please don't do this. We can fix this. I'll do anything. Counseling, therapy, whatever you need. Just please don't give up on us. I stared at that message for a long time. And then I blocked his number. Emma was the hardest part. Explaining to a 7-year-old why mommy and daddy weren't living together anymore. Why daddy had done something very wrong. Why our family was breaking apart. I tried to keep it age-appropriate, to shield her from the worst of it. But kids aren't stupid. She knew something big had happened. She asked if daddy was in trouble. If he still loved her. If it was her fault. No, baby, I told her, holding her close. None of this is your fault. Daddy made some choices that hurt our family. But he loves you so much. That will never change. She cried into my shoulder, and I cried too because I couldn't protect her from this pain. Couldn't shield her from the fallout of her father's decisions. My mom moved in with us for a while to help. She didn't ask questions, didn't pry. Just showed up with casseroles and hugs and the kind of quiet, steady support that only a mother can give. Jess came over almost every night. We'd sit on the back porch with wine and she'd let me rant, let me cry, let me say all the angry, broken things I couldn't say in front of Emma. I keep thinking about all the signs I missed, I told her one night. The nights he came home late. The way he was always on his phone. That weekend he went to the conference in Vegas. How could I have been so blind? You weren't blind, Liv. You trusted him. That's what you're supposed to do in a marriage. He's the one who broke that trust. But it didn't feel that way. Felt like failure. Like I should have known. Should have seen it coming. I started therapy. Twice a week, I sat in a small office in Kirkland and talked to a woman named Dr. Sarah about betrayal and grief and identity. Because that's what it felt like, a death. The death of the person I thought I was. The wife. Partner. The woman who'd believed in her marriage. You're allowed to grieve, Dr. Sarah told me. You lost something real. The life you thought you had, the future you'd planned. That deserves to be mourned. So I mourned. I let myself feel everything. The rage. The humiliation. The bone-deep sadness. I stopped pretending I was okay and let myself fall apart in the safety of her office. And slowly, painfully, I started to rebuild. The weeks turned into months. Jake moved out of the guest room and into an apartment near his office. He had visitation rights with Emma. Supervised at first, then gradually more. She'd come home from his place and tell me about their weekends. How Daddy had taken her to the zoo. How they'd made pancakes for breakfast. How he'd cried when she asked why he couldn't come home. Every story was a knife to my heart. Not because I wanted him back. But because I mourned the father Emma had lost. The one who'd been present and engaged and not weighed down by guilt and grief and the consequences of his own actions. I went back to work part-time at the non-profit where I'd worked before Emma was born. It felt good to have a purpose again, to be more than just Jake's ex-wife or Emma's mom. My co-workers were kind, asking gentle questions but never pushing. I appreciated that more than they knew. 3 months after the accident, I was standing in line at Target when I saw her. Madison's mother. I recognized her from the news coverage of the funeral. She was standing by the greeting cards, her face drawn and tired. Our eyes met across the aisle, and for a moment, neither of us moved. Then she walked over. "You're Olivia Patterson," she said. It wasn't a question. Yes. My heart was pounding. "I'm so sorry about your daughter." Her expression was hard to read. Grief, anger, exhaustion. All of it tangled together. She was 28 years old. She had her whole life ahead of her. "I know. I can't imagine what you're going through. Can't you?" Her voice sharpened. "Your husband killed my daughter. He was driving recklessly, speeding, and she paid the price. So don't tell me you can't imagine." I wanted to defend him. Some old instinct, some lingering loyalty, made me want to say it was an accident, that he didn't mean for it to happen. But I couldn't. 'Cause she was right. Madison was dead because of Jake's choices. Because of his affair. Because of his lies. You're right, I said quietly. I'm sorry. She studied me for a long moment. Then her expression softened, just slightly. She didn't know he was married. Not at first. He told her he was separated. By the time she found out the truth, she stopped, her voice breaking. She was already in love with him. The words hit me like a physical blow. Madison hadn't known. She'd been lied to just like me. I'm filing a wrongful death suit, she continued. My lawyer says we have a strong case. I thought you should know. I understand. She nodded once, then turned and walked away. I stood there in the middle of Target, my hands shaking, my vision blurred with tears. Another casualty of Jake's deception. Another life destroyed. What I found later still haunts me. The lawsuit moved forward. Jake's insurance covered part of it, but there would be a settlement. Payout. A dollar amount assigned to Madison's life. Felt obscene. Inadequate. Like trying to quantify the unquantifiable. Jake and I communicated only through lawyers now. Cold, formal exchanges about custody schedules and financial arrangements. The man I'd shared a bed with for 9 years had become a stranger. Someone I only knew through legal documents and court filings. Emma started asking more questions. Why had Daddy done something wrong? What did affair mean? Had Daddy stopped loving us? I did my best to answer honestly without burdening her with details she was too young to process. But it was a tightrope walk. Too much information and I'd traumatize her. Too little and I'd be lying. Daddy made a choice to spend time with someone else when he should have been with us, I explained one night as I tucked her into bed. It hurt Mommy very much. But it doesn't change how much he loves you. Does he still love you? She asked, her voice small. I don't know, baby. But I know he's very sorry for what he did. She was quiet for a moment. Then, are you still mad at him? Yes. But I'm also sad. And hurt. And a lot of other things. It's complicated. She nodded like she understood, even though I knew she didn't. Not really. How could she? I barely understood it myself. The holidays were brutal. Thanksgiving meant splitting Emma's time between my family and Jake's. Christmas meant explaining to her why we couldn't all be together, why Daddy wouldn't be there Christmas morning when she opened her presents. She handled it better than I did. Kids are resilient like that. But I saw the confusion in her eyes. The longing for something that didn't exist anymore. I spent Christmas Eve crying in the bathtub after Emma had gone to bed. The water went cold around me, but I couldn't bring myself to move. I kept thinking about last Christmas. How Jake had stayed up late assembling Emma's new bike. How we'd watched It's a Wonderful Life on the couch. His arm around my shoulders. How normal everything had seemed. It had all been a lie. By the 6-month mark, I'd started to find a rhythm. Emma was in therapy too, working through her feelings about the divorce with a child psychologist who specialized in family trauma. My mom had moved back to her own place, but she still came over for dinner twice a week. Jess was still my rock, showing up with wine and takeout whenever I needed her. I was functioning, surviving. Some days I even felt okay. But there were still hard moments. Seeing couples at the grocery store holding hands. Watching romantic comedies where everything worked out and the guy got the girl. Lying in bed at night, alone, wondering how my life had veered so far off course. The dreams were the worst. I'd dream about Jake and Madison in the car. I'd see the tree coming. Hear the sound of impact. Wake up gasping, my heart racing, my sheets soaked with sweat. Dr. Sarah said it was PTSD. That my brain was trying to process the trauma even while I slept. I started taking sleeping pills. Around the 8-month mark, Jess convinced me to try dating again. She set up a profile for me on one of those apps, picking out photos and writing a bio that made me sound way more put together than I felt. "You need to remember that you're still desirable," she said. "That you're not defined by what Jake did to you." So I went on dates. Coffee with a software engineer who talked about himself the entire time. Dinner with a divorced dad who spent an hour complaining about his ex-wife. Drinks with a guy who seemed nice until he made a joke about crazy exes. And I realized I was going to be someone's crazy ex-wife story. But then I met Marcus. He was a teacher at Emma's school, 4th grade, so not her teacher, but I'd seen him around at pickup and drop-off. He had kind eyes and an easy smile, and when Jess suggested I ask him out, I thought she was crazy. "I can't date someone from Emma's school," I protested. "Why not? He's single. You're single. He's hot. What's the problem?" The problem was that I was terrified. Terrified of putting myself out there again. Terrified of trusting someone new. Terrified of getting hurt. But Jess wore me down, and eventually I found myself standing in the school parking lot, nervously approaching Marcus as he loaded art supplies into his car. "Hey," I said, my voice embarrassingly shaky. "I'm Liv. Emma Patterson's mom." "Oh yeah, Emma's great. Smart kid." He smiled. "Is everything okay?" "Yeah, everything's fine. I took a breath. Would you maybe want to grab coffee sometime?" His smile widened. "I'd love that." We went out that Saturday. Just coffee at a local place in Kirkland. We talked about teaching, about kids, about our favorite books and movies. He made me laugh. Really laugh for the first time in months. "Can I ask you something?" he said as we were leaving. "You seem nervous. Is this weird for you? The whole dating thing." I appreciated his directness. "I'm going through a divorce. It's been really hard." "I'm sorry. That sucks." "Yeah, it does. If you're not ready for this, I understand. No pressure." But I was ready. Or at least I wanted to be. "No," I said. "I'd like to see you again. If that's okay." "It's more than okay." We started seeing each other regularly. Nothing serious at first. Just dinners and movies and long walks through local parks. He knew about Jake, about the affair, about everything. And he didn't run. He listened. He understood. He made me feel seen in a way I hadn't felt in years. "You're not broken, you know," he told me one evening as we sat on a bench watching the sunset over Lake Washington. "You're healing. There's a difference." Maybe he was right. Jake found out about Marcus 3 months into our relationship. Emma had mentioned him during one of her visits, and Jake called me immediately, angry and accusatory. "You're already seeing someone. It hasn't even been a year. You don't get to have an opinion on my personal life anymore," I said, my voice calm. "We're divorced. What I do is none of your business. She's my daughter. Anyone you bring around her is my business. Marcus is a teacher at her school. He's been background checked 6 ways from Sunday. And more importantly, he treats her with kindness and respect. Which is more than I can say for you right now." He hung up without another word. Dr. Sarah and I talked about that conversation in our next session. About boundaries. About Jake's lingering sense of ownership over my life. About how I needed to keep reinforcing that our marriage was over, that he'd lost the right to weigh in on my choices the moment he'd betrayed me. "How does it feel?" she asked. "Being with someone new?" "Scary. Exciting. Guilt-inducing." "Why guilt?" "Because some part of me still thinks I should be mourning my marriage. That it's too soon. That I'm being disloyal somehow. To who? To Jake. The man who had an affair for over a year. She had a point. You're allowed to move on, Liv. You're allowed to be happy. That doesn't erase what happened. It doesn't mean you're over it. It just means you're choosing to live your life instead of staying stuck in the past. So I chose to live. Marcus met Emma officially a few months later. I was nervous, worried about how she'd react, but she took to him immediately. He had this way with kids. Patient, goofy, genuinely interested in what they had to say. They spent an afternoon building a fort in my living room while I made dinner, and when I checked on them, they were both laughing so hard they could barely breathe. Felt like hope. Jake reached out on what would have been our 10th anniversary. A long email full of apologies and regrets and pleas for forgiveness. He said he was in therapy, that he was working on himself, that he'd give anything to undo what he'd done, that he still loved me, that he always would. I read it 3 times. And then I wrote back a single line. I hope you find peace, Jake. But I need you to stop contacting me outside of matters involving Emma. He didn't respond. And that was okay. The lawsuit was settled out of court for an undisclosed amount. Jake's insurance paid most of it, but he was still financially devastated. He'd lost his job, his reputation, his family. Madison's mother had gotten some measure of justice, but I knew no amount of money would bring her daughter back. I thought about reaching out to her, telling her I was sorry, that I wished things had been different. But I didn't. Some wounds are too deep for apologies. It's been over a year now since the accident. A year since my life exploded and I had to build something new from the wreckage. Emma's doing well. She still has moments, when she asks why we can't all live together, or when she sees other kids with both parents at school events, but she's resilient. She's in therapy, she has friends, she's thriving academically. Kids are stronger than we give them credit for. I'm doing well too. Better than I ever thought possible. Marcus and I are taking things slow, but it's good. Real. Built on honesty instead of lies. He knows all my broken parts and he's not scared of them. My relationship with Jake has settled into something civil, if distant. We co-parent Emma. We show up to her school events and sit on opposite sides of the auditorium. We exchange brief, polite texts about schedules and doctor's appointments. We're never going to be friends, but we're functional. And for Emma's sake, that's enough. I still have bad days. Days when I think about everything I lost. The future I'd planned. The person I used to be. But the bad days are fewer now. Farther between. I've learned things about myself this past year. That I'm stronger than I knew. That I can survive the unsurvivable. That betrayal doesn't define me. How I respond to it does. I've learned that healing isn't linear. That some days I'll feel fine and other days I'll break down in the cereal aisle at Safeway because I saw the kind of granola Jake used to eat. That's okay. That's part of the process. I've learned that love isn't enough. That trust matters. That actions speak louder than words. That when someone shows you who they really are, you have to believe them. Most importantly, I've learned that I don't need a partner to be whole. That I can stand on my own 2 feet. That I'm capable of building a life I'm proud of. A life based on truth and self-respect and the kind of love I actually deserve. Some days I even feel grateful. Not for what happened, never for that. But for what it taught me. About resilience. About self-worth. About the difference between surviving and living. I'm not the woman I was a year ago. That version of me died in the passenger seat of Jake's car along with Madison. But the woman I'm becoming, she's stronger, wiser, unafraid of the truth, unafraid of being alone, unafraid of demanding better. I think about Madison sometimes, about the life she'll never get to live. the dreams she'll never fulfill. I wonder what she would have become if she'd had more time. If she'd met someone who deserved her. Someone who wouldn't have lied to her. Someone who wouldn't have gotten her killed. I hope she's at peace. And I hope, wherever Jake is in his journey, that he carries the weight of what he did. Not as punishment, but as a reminder. A reminder that our choices have consequences. That the people we love deserve better than our lies. That some mistakes can't be undone. As for me, I'm finally learning to forgive myself. For not seeing the signs. For trusting too easily. For believing that love was enough to protect me from betrayal. It wasn't my fault. I know that now. Jake made his choices. Madison paid the price. And I survived. That's what matters. I survived. Sometimes the person you die for is the same one who teaches you how to live again. Even if it's by showing you exactly who you don't want to be. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and share for more stories like this.